John had seen many broken things under the Oshodi Bridge, but never a dying woman in a hospital gown. She lay crumpled against the concrete pillar like a discarded newspaper, her bald head gleaming with fever sweat, and 4-tube trailing from her arm like a lifeline to nowhere. Most people would have walked past. This was Lagos, after all, where survival meant minding your own business. But John wasn't most people. "Sister," he whispered, kneeling beside her despite his torn clothes and empty stomach. His calloused hands, gentle as a mother's touch, checked for a pulse. Still alive. Barely. As he lifted her fragile body, she opened eyes that held more pain than anyone should carry. "Please," she breathed, "don't let me die like this." "You're not dying today," John promised, though he had no idea how he'd keep that promise. He was homeless, penniless, surviving on scraps and kindness. But looking at this broken woman, he felt something stir in his chest, a purpose he'd lost years ago. What he didn't know was that the woman in his arms was Chioma Okafor, abandoned wife of Nigeria's third richest man. What he couldn't imagine was that saving her would change both their lives forever. But this story doesn't start with the rescue. It starts 3 years earlier, with a fairy tale that became a nightmare. Welcome to Becky Stories. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Take a moment to support us by hitting the subscribe button. Like, share, and comment below. Chioma Okoye was washing dishes at Mama Cass's Bukka when the Rolls-Royce pulled up outside. It was 6 p.m. on a Thursday, the dinner rush in full swing, and Chioma's hands were raw from scrubbing pots since dawn. At 24, she was already considered too old for marriage by her village standards, too poor for Lagos standards, and too tired to care about either. The Bukka, a small roadside restaurant in Surulere, was all she had left after her parents died in a car accident 2 years earlier. The insurance money had gone to medical bills, the family house to creditors, and her university dreams to the harsh reality of survival. "Chioma." Mama Cass shouted from the front. "Customer wants to see the cook." Chioma wiped her hands on her stained apron, assuming someone wanted to complain about the jollof rice. It wouldn't be the first time. But when she stepped into the dining area, she found herself staring at the most handsome man she'd ever seen. Chief Emeka Okafor sat alone at the plastic table, his 3-piece Armani suit looking completely out of place among the chipped plates and faded tablecloths. At 38, he commanded attention without trying, tall, well-built, with a kind of confident bearing that came from never hearing the word no. "You cook this." He gestured to his empty plate, which had contained her pepper soup and pounded yam. Chioma nodded, suddenly conscious of her appearance. Her hijab was crooked, her uniform stained, and she probably smelled like palm oil and locust beans. "It's the best meal I've had in years," Chief Emeka said, his voice warm with genuine appreciation. "My mother used to cook like this before she passed." "Where did you learn?" "From my mama," Chioma replied quietly. She said food cooked with love always tastes better than food cooked with money. Something shifted in Chief Emeka's expression. He'd eaten at the finest restaurants from Lagos to London, but this simple girl had made him remember what food was supposed to taste like home, like care, like someone actually wanted to nourish your soul instead of impress your wallet. "What's your name?" he asked. "Chioma, sir." "Chioma," he repeated, savoring the sound. "Good gift. Your name suits you." For the next hour, Chief Emeka stayed in that tiny bukka, talking to the girl who served his food with shy smiles and careful words. He learned she was educated, had been studying accounting at the University of Lagos before her parents' death forced her to drop out. He learned she was kind, sending money to her younger brother in the village even though she barely had enough for herself. He learned she was strong, working 16-hour days without complaint to keep the bukka afloat. Most importantly, he learned she was different from every other woman who had ever looked at him. She didn't see his money, his cars, his social status. She saw a man who had complimented her cooking and spoken to her with respect. When he finally left that evening, pressing 1,000 naira tip into her surprised hands, Chief Emeka was already planning his return. "You'll see me again," he promised, and something in his voice made Chioma's heart flutter like a caged bird tasting freedom. What she didn't know was that Chief Emeka Okafor was a man who collected beautiful things. His Banana Island mansion was filled with art antiques and expensive toys that had once held his interest before becoming part of the scenery. What she couldn't imagine was that to him, she was just another acquisition waiting to happen. A pure, innocent girl who would look perfect on his arm and make him feel like a good man for rescuing her from poverty. But as Chief Emeka drove home in his Rolls Royce that night, something unexpected stirred in his chest. For the first time in his 43 years, he felt like he'd found something real. He had no idea that real things were fragile. And he had no idea how carelessly he would eventually shatter this one. Chief Emeka returned every day for 2 weeks. At first, Chioma thought it was coincidence. Rich men sometimes stumbled into local bukas when their drivers took shortcuts through Surulere. But when he started ordering the same pepper soup and asking specifically for her to serve him, she began to wonder. "That big man likes you," Mama Cass whispered on the 10th day, watching through the kitchen window as Chief Emeka sat at his usual plastic table, checking his gold Rolex, as if he had nowhere more important to be. "See how he dresses up just to eat our food?" Chioma peeked out and had to admit Mama Cass was right. Each day, Chief Emeka wore increasingly expensive outfits, Italian shoes that cost more than her yearly salary, watches that could buy a house, silk ties that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He was peacocking, and she was the intended audience. "He's just being nice," Chioma murmured, but her heart betrayed her with its rapid beating every time he smiled at her. On the 15th day, Chief Emeka didn't come alone. 3 black SUVs pulled up outside the buka, causing a traffic jam as curious onlookers tried to see which politician or celebrity was visiting their neighborhood. Chief Emeka stepped out of the middle vehicle wearing a white agbada that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries, followed by 4 bodyguards in matching black suits. The other customers scattered like startled chickens, leaving only Chioma and Mama Cass staring in shock. "Good evening," Chief Emeka said, as if arriving with a convoy was perfectly normal. "I hope I'm not too early for dinner." Chioma could barely find her voice. "Sir, the other customers. We'll find somewhere else to eat tonight," he finished gently. "I wanted to have a private conversation with you." Mama Cass, wise in the ways of Lego survival, quickly ushered her remaining customers out with promises of free meals tomorrow. Soon, the buka was empty except for Chioma, Chief Emeka, and his intimidating entourage. "Sit," he gestured to the chair across from him. Chioma's hands shook as she untied her apron. She'd never been alone with a man of his caliber. In Lagos, such men were like gods, existing in a different realm entirely. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. Chioma shook her head, though she'd heard whispers. Some said he was into oil, others construction. All agreed he was powerful enough to make problems disappear. "I'm Chief Emeka Okafor. I own Okafor Industries, construction, real estate, oil servicing. Maybe you've seen our billboards around Lagos." She had. Those massive advertisements with his face and the slogan, "Building Nigeria's Future." She'd pass them daily without imagining the man in the picture would ever sit in her humble buka. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Chief Emeka leaned forward, his expression suddenly vulnerable in a way that made her forget about the bodyguards and expensive clothes. "Because I want you to understand what I'm offering you," he said quietly. "I want to take care of you, Chioma. I want to pay for you to finish university, to never worry about money again, to live the life you deserve." Chioma's breath caught. Sir, I don't understand. I'm asking you to be my wife. The words hung in the air like smoke from a sacrifice. Chioma stared at this powerful man who could have any woman in Nigeria, wondering if she'd misheard or if this was some elaborate joke. But sir, you don't even know me, she whispered. I know enough, Chief Emeka replied. I know you work 16 hours a day without complaining. I know you send money to your brother even when you have nothing. I know you cook with love instead of just skill. I know you're the kind of woman who would make a man remember what matters. Tears stung Chioma's eyes. After years of struggle, of feeling invisible and forgotten, here was a man offering her everything she'd lost: security, education, a future. What do you say? He asked, pulling out a small velvet box. Inside was a diamond ring, so large it seemed to capture all the light in the room. Chioma looked at the ring, then at the man offering it, then at the buka that represented her entire world. The smart part of her brain whispered warnings. This was too fast, too good to be true, too much like the Nollywood movies that always ended badly. But the tired, lonely, desperate part of her heart whispered something else entirely. Yes, she breathed, and Chief Emeka's smile was brighter than his diamond. What Chioma didn't see were the satisfied glances exchanged between his bodyguards. What she didn't hear was the quiet conversation one of them had with Mama Cass, ensuring the older woman's silence about certain aspects of Chief Emeka's courtship. And what she couldn't have imagined was that in exactly 18 months, this same man would look at her with disgust and call her useless. But that night, as he slipped the ring onto her finger and promised her the world, Chioma believed in fairy tales. The first crack in paradise appeared 3 months after the wedding. Chioma should have been the happiest woman in Lagos. She lived in a 20-room mansion on Banana Island, wore designer clothes that cost more than her old annual salary, and had a driver, cook, and maid attending to her every need. Chief Emeka had kept every promise. Her university fees were paid, her brother's school expenses handled, and she wanted for nothing material. But she was slowly disappearing. It started with small corrections. Chioma, you don't speak like that at dinner parties, Chief Emeka would murmur after she thanked the staff too warmly. These people expect a certain refinement from my wife. Then came the lessons. Etiquette classes with a stern British woman who taught her which fork to use and how to laugh without showing too much emotion. French lessons because cultured people speak multiple languages. Fashion consultants who replaced her colorful Ankara with muted European designs that made her feel like she was wearing costumes. I'm just helping you become the woman you're meant to be, Chief Emeka assured her when she quietly protested. You're too special to remain unpolished. The word stung more than an outright insult. Unpolished. As if everything about her, her voice, her mannerisms, her way of seeing the world, was a rough edge that needed smoothing. Slowly, Chioma learned to speak softer, laugh less, ask for permission instead of offering opinions. She learned that her husband's love came with conditions she hadn't understood when she'd accepted his ring. The dinner party where everything changed was hosted by Chief Adebayo, one of Lagos's most influential politicians. Chioma had spent hours preparing, practicing her French, memorizing the guest list, rehearsing safe conversation topics with the same dedication she'd once used for her university exams. She thought she'd done well. She'd spoken when spoken to, smiled appropriately, and even received compliments on her appearance from several guests. But in the car ride home, Chief Emeka's silence was deafening. You embarrassed me tonight, he said finally, not looking at her. Chioma's stomach dropped. How? What did I do wrong? Mrs. Fashola asked about your background, and you told her about working in a buka. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the anger beneath. Do you understand how that reflects on me? My wife was a common food server. But that's how we met, Chioma whispered. You said you loved. I said many things during courtship, Chief Emeka interrupted. But we're married now. Reality is different from romance. The words hit her like cold water. Reality, as if their entire relationship had been a performance, and now she was expected to understand the script without being told. From now on, he continued, when people ask about your past, you tell them you were studying business administration before we met. You volunteered at the Bukka occasionally for charity work. Do you understand? Chioma nodded, though her throat felt tight. He was asking her to erase herself, to pretend the woman he'd fallen in love with had never existed. That night, alone in their massive bedroom, while Chief Emeka worked late in his study, Chioma called her brother Kelechi for the first time in weeks. Sister Chioma. His voice was bright with excitement. How is married life treating you? Fine, she lied, sitting on the edge of their king-size bed that suddenly felt like an island. How is school? Wonderful. I'm top of my class in mathematics, and the headmaster says I might get a scholarship to university. None of this would be possible without your husband's generosity. Chioma smiled for the first time in days. At least some good had come from her marriage. Kelechi would have opportunities she'd never dreamed of. Sister, Kelechi's voice grew concerned. You sound different. Sad. Is everything okay? Chioma looked around the opulent bedroom. The silk curtains, the marble floors, the view of Lagos Harbor that people paid millions to see. She had everything any woman could want. I'm fine, she repeated, the lie burning her tongue. I have to go. Your brother-in-law wants dinner. After she hung up, Chioma sat in the golden prison of her new life, wondering when loving someone had become synonymous with becoming no one. Downstairs, she could hear Chief Emeka on a phone call, his voice animated in a way it never was when he spoke to her anymore. Yes, she's adjusting well, he was saying. The investment is paying off nicely. My social standing has improved considerably since marrying someone so authentic. The voters love a man who lifts up the common people. Chioma pressed her hand to her mouth to muffle the sob that escaped. Investment. She was an investment in his political ambitions, a calculated move to improve his public image. She should have run that night. Should have packed her things and fled back to Surulere, back to her old life where she was poor but real. Instead, she stayed, because she still believed that love could conquer everything, even a man who saw her as a project to be perfected rather than a person to be cherished. She had no idea that the worst was yet to come. The pregnancy test showed 2 pink lines, and Chioma's world crumbled. She sat on the marble floor of their master bathroom, staring at the small plastic stick that held her fate. After 18 months of marriage, 18 months of slowly disappearing into the role of perfect political wife, she was finally pregnant. She should have been overjoyed. This was what she'd prayed for, what she'd hoped would bring back the man who had once looked at her like she hung the moon. A baby would complete their family, make their love real again. Instead, all she felt was terror, because 3 weeks earlier, Chioma had discovered the lump. It had started as a small hardness in her left breast, barely noticeable during her morning shower. She'd ignored it at first, telling herself it was nothing, just stress from the constant pressure of being Chief Emeka's showcase wife. But the lump had grown. And with it came the fatigue that no amount of sleep could cure, the nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness, and the bone-deep exhaustion that made even lifting her arms feel like climbing a mountain. The pregnancy test clattered to the floor as Chioma's hands began to shake. How could she be pregnant and sick at the same time? How could she bring a child into a world where she was barely surviving herself? Chioma. Chief Emeka's voice echoed from the bedroom. The car is waiting. We can't be late for the governor's fundraiser. She looked at herself in the mirror. Designer gown that cost more than most people's cars. Diamonds that caught the light like frozen tears. Makeup that hid the shadows under her eyes, but couldn't hide the fear in them. "Coming," she called. Her voice steady despite the chaos in her heart. The fundraiser was a blur of handshakes, forced smiles, and small talk with Lagos elite who discussed charity donations while wearing jewelry worth millions. Chioma played her part perfectly. The dutiful wife who spoke when spoken to and never drew attention from her husband's political networking. But halfway through the evening, the pain hit her like lightning. It started in her chest, a burning sensation that radiated down her arm and up her neck. The room began to spin, voices becoming distant echoes, as her vision blurred around the edges. "Excuse me," she whispered to the woman she'd been speaking with, the governor's wife, whose name Chioma suddenly couldn't remember. She made it to the bathroom before collapsing. When she came to, she was lying on the cold marble floor, staring up at concerned faces. Someone had called Chief Emeka, who knelt beside her with an expression of irritation barely masked as concern. "Too much excitement," he announced to the gathered crowd, his political smile never wavering. "My wife has been working too hard with her charity projects." Charity projects. Another lie to maintain his image. Chioma had been forbidden from working since their marriage, deemed too unrefined for any meaningful role in his business or social circles. The ride to Lagos University Teaching Hospital was silent except for Chief Emeka's phone calls, rescheduling meetings, and managing the PR fallout from his wife's dramatic episode at a high-profile event. Dr. Adebola, the oncologist who examined Chioma, was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and gentle hands. After hours of tests, blood work, and scans, she delivered the news that changed everything. "Mrs. Okafor, you have stage 2 breast cancer," she said quietly, her voice professional but compassionate. "The good news is we caught it relatively early. With immediate treatment, chemotherapy followed by surgery, your prognosis is very good." Chioma heard the words as if from underwater. Cancer. The disease that had killed her mother's sister, that had made her watch a vibrant woman waste away to nothing. However, Dr. Adebola continued, "You're also pregnant. About 6 weeks along. We'll need to discuss your options carefully, as cancer treatment during pregnancy requires. Get rid of it." The words came from Chief Emeka, who had been silent until that moment. Both women turned to stare at, "Excuse me." Dr. Adebola's voice was sharp. "The pregnancy," Chief Emeka said calmly, as if discussing a business transaction. "Terminate it. My wife needs cancer treatment immediately, and a baby will only complicate things." "Sir," Dr. Adebola's voice was carefully controlled. "That's not a decision you can make for your wife. These are complex medical choices that require." "How long will treatment take?" Chief Emeka interrupted, looking only at the doctor, as if Chioma wasn't sitting right there. "With chemotherapy, surgery, and recovery? At least a year, possibly 18 months. Chief Emeka nodded briskly. "And during this time, she'll be unavailable for social functions? Unable to fulfill her duties as my wife?" The question hung in the air like poison gas. Dr. Adebola looked horrified, and Chioma felt something inside her chest crack that had nothing to do with cancer. "Mr. Okafor," Dr. Adebola said slowly, "your wife will be fighting for her life. Social functions should be the least of your concerns." Chief Emeka stood up, straightening his expensive suit. "Doctor, please prepare whatever paperwork is needed for the termination, and see that my wife's condition remains confidential. I can't have rumors affecting my political campaign." He walked out of the room without looking at Chioma once. Sitting in that sterile hospital room, holding a diagnosis that could kill her and carrying a baby her husband wanted eliminated, Chioma finally understood the truth. She had never been his wife. She had been his accessory. And accessories that broke were simply replaced. Everything she believed was a lie. Chioma discovered the papers by accident, hidden in Chief Emeka's home office behind a family photo that had never included her. She'd been looking for aspirin. The chemotherapy had started 3 days earlier, and the nausea was unbearable. Her husband had locked himself in his study after another argument about her condition, and she'd hoped to find something, anything, to ease the pain that was eating her from the inside out. The manila folder was labeled personal insurance policies, but when it fell open, the documents inside had nothing to do with life insurance. They were divorce papers, dated 6 months earlier. Chioma's hands trembled as she read through the legal language, but the meaning was crystal clear. Chief Emeka had been planning to leave her long before she got sick. The papers cited irreconcilable differences and requested that she receive no alimony, no claim to his assets, no rights to anything they'd built together. But it was the second document that made her blood freeze. A prenuptial agreement she had never seen before, supposedly signed on their wedding day. Her signature looked perfect, but she remembered that day clearly. There had been no prenup, no legal documents beyond the marriage certificate. Yet here was proof that she had supposedly signed away all rights to his fortune, agreeing to leave the marriage with nothing if it ended within 5 years. The signature was flawless, professional, forged. Find what you were looking for? Chioma spun around to find Chief Emeka standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. He'd caught her red-handed, but instead of anger, his face showed something worse, satisfaction. You forged my signature, she whispered, holding up the prenup. Prove it, he said calmly, walking to his desk and pouring himself a glass of whiskey. But more importantly, ask yourself, what difference does it make now? You were planning to divorce me before I got sick. I was planning to divorce you because you got sick. His voice was matter-of-fact, as if explaining basic mathematics. The cancer just accelerated my timeline. Chioma felt the world tilt around her. What do you mean? Chief Emeka settled into his leather chair, studying her like a specimen under a microscope. Do you remember Dr. Adebola mentioning that breast cancer can be hereditary? That family history is a major risk factor. She nodded numbly. I had your medical records investigated 6 months after our wedding. Your mother's family has an extensive history of cancer. Your maternal aunt died of breast cancer at 31. Your grandmother died of ovarian cancer at 28. Your cousin in Enugu is currently undergoing treatment for cervical cancer. The room seemed to shrink around Chioma as the implications hit her. You knew, she breathed. You knew I would get sick. I suspected, Chief Emeka corrected. And I made contingency plans. A man in my position can't afford to have his political career damaged by a dying wife. The sympathy vote only goes so far before it becomes a liability. So you married me anyway, knowing I would probably die young. I married you because you were perfect for my image at the time. Young, beautiful, from humble beginnings, exactly what I needed to connect with common voters. The fact that you'd likely develop cancer in your 20s was an inconvenience I was prepared to manage. Chioma stared at this man she had loved, had trusted with her life and dreams, and realized she was looking at a stranger who had calculated her death into his business plan. The new wife, she said quietly, pieces falling into place. You already have someone else. Chief Emeka's smile was thin and cruel. Adana Nwosu, 22, medical student. Father owns 3 hospitals in Abuja. Perfect genetics, perfect background, perfect breeding potential. She's already pregnant. The words hit Chioma like physical blows. While she was fighting for her life, he was building a new family with a woman young enough to be her sister. Does she know? Chioma asked. About me. She knows I'm widowed, Chief Emeka said casually. It's not technically a lie. You're dying after all. I'm not dead yet. No, he agreed, standing and walking to the window that overlooked his perfectly manicured garden. But you will be. The chemotherapy will buy you some time, maybe 6 months, maybe a year. But the cancer will spread. It always does in your family. He turned back to her with a cold efficiency of a businessman closing a deal. Here's what's going to happen, Chioma. You're going to quietly undergo your treatment while living in the guest quarters. When you inevitably take a turn for the worse, you'll be moved to a private facility where you can die with dignity, away from public attention. I'll be the grieving widower who tried everything to save his beloved wife. And if I refuse? Chief Emeka's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. Then I'll stop paying your brother's school fees. I'll stop funding his university scholarship. I'll make sure he's expelled from his current school for inability to pay, and I'll see that no other institution in Nigeria accept him. The threat hit its mark perfectly. Kelechi was brilliant, hard-working, deserving of every opportunity. He was also completely dependent on Chief Emeka's money. You bastard, Chioma whispered. I'm a realist, Chief Emeka replied. And I'm offering you a choice. Play your part, die quietly, and your brother has a future. Or fight me, and watch me destroy the only family you have left. Standing in that opulent office, surrounded by wealth that had never truly been hers, Chioma finally understood the choice she was facing. She could be a victim or a martyr, but she could never be a winner. Not in his game, not by his rules, not unless she learned to play by her own. Choose wisely. The phone number was written in careful script on expensive stationery. Adana Nwosu Personal. Chioma stared at it, her chemotherapy-weakened hands trembling as she held the evidence of her replacement. She'd found it in Chief Emeka's jacket pocket while looking for her confiscated pain medication. The medication he'd locked away for her own good, claiming she was becoming dependent. The same medication that Dr. Adebola had prescribed to help her survive the agony of fighting for her life. For 2 weeks, Chioma had endured his latest cruelty in silence. She'd watched him dress for business meetings that lasted until dawn, smelled unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, seen the satisfied smile he wore when he thought she wasn't looking. But holding that phone number, something crystallized in her chest. Something harder than cancer, stronger than fear. She wasn't going to die quietly. The phone rang 3 times before a bright, young voice answered. Hello. Adana. Chioma's voice was hoarse from the chemo, but steady. This is Chioma Okafor, Emeka's wife. Silence. Then barely a whisper. His wife. The one he told you is dead. Chioma continued, each word deliberate. I'm very much alive, Adana. And I need to warn you about the man you think you love. I don't understand. He said he was widowed. He showed me pictures of the funeral. Whose funeral? Chioma asked gently. Because I'm sitting in his guest room right now, dying of the cancer he knew I would develop before he married me. For the next hour, Chioma told Adana everything. The forged prenup, the calculated courtship, the medical investigation into her family history, the planned timeline of her death. She spoke with the calm clarity of someone who had nothing left to lose. He's using you the same way he used me, Chioma concluded. Your father's hospitals give him credibility in the medical community. Your youth makes him look virile. Your pregnancy gives him an heir with perfect genetics. But when you're no longer useful, stop. Adana's voice was breaking. Please stop. He'll destroy you too, Chioma finished softly. Unless you run. Now. Today. The line went dead. Chioma sat in the darkness of the guest room, waiting. She didn't have to wait long. You did what? Chief Emeka's roar shook the mansion's foundations. Chioma heard him thundering up the stairs, his expensive shoes striking marble like gunshots. Her door exploded open. Chief Emeka stood in the doorway, his usually perfect appearance disheveled, his eyes wild with a rage she'd never seen before. You called her, he snarled, advancing on her like a predator. You poisoned her mind with your lies. I told her the truth, Chioma replied calmly. Something you've never done. The truth. He laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. The truth is that you're a dying woman, desperate and delusional. Adana saw right through your pathetic attempt at sabotage. But Chioma could see the lie in his eyes, could see the fear beneath the fury. She left you, didn't she? Chioma said quietly. Your perfect replacement. Your genetic prize. She saw you for what you really are. Chief Emeka's hand shot out faster than thought, wrapping around her throat. His fingers pressed against her windpipe with the casual violence of a man who had never been denied anything. You have no idea what you've done, he whispered, his face inches from hers. Adana was carrying the future governor of Lagos State. My son. My legacy. And you poisoned her against me. Chioma struggled to breathe, but she managed to smile. Good. His grip tightened. For a moment, she thought he might actually kill her right there, end her suffering and his problem in one violent act. Instead, he released her, and she collapsed back onto the bed, gasping. You want to fight me? Chief Emeka straightened his tie with hands that shook with barely contained rage. Fine. Let's see how well you fight without medical treatment. The words hit her like ice water. What? Your cancer treatment is expensive, Chioma. Very expensive. And since you've proven yourself unable to follow simple instructions, I see no reason to continue funding your recovery attempts. You can't. I can do anything I want, he interrupted. The treatment stops today. Dr. Adebola will receive a call from my lawyers explaining that you're seeking alternative medicine. Something about herbal remedies and spiritual healing. Chioma stared at him in horror. Without chemotherapy, the cancer would consume her in months instead of years. But Chief Emeka wasn't finished. And your brother's scholarship? Revoked. His school fees? Unpaid. By tomorrow morning, Kelechi will be expelled from that fancy boarding school you're so proud of. And I'll make sure every other institution in Nigeria knows he's not worth the risk. No. The word tore from Chioma's throat like a prayer. Please. Kelechi has nothing to do with this. He's innocent. He's leverage. Chief Emeka corrected coldly. And you just lost it. He walked to the door, then paused, looking back at her with something that might have been pity if it hadn't been so cold. You could have died quietly, with dignity, he said. Your brother could have had a future. But you chose to fight me instead. Now you'll die slowly and painfully, and the boy you sacrificed your marriage to protect will end up exactly where you found him, in poverty, with no options and no hope. The door slammed shut, leaving Chioma alone with the magnitude of her choice. 2 hours later, her phone rang. Kelechi's number. Sister. His voice was small, confused, younger than his 17 years. They said I have to leave school. They said the fees haven't been paid, and they're canceling my scholarship. But that can't be right, can it? Brother Emeka promised. It's true, Chioma whispered, her heart breaking with each word. But why? What did I do wrong? My grades are excellent. My teachers say I'm their best student. You did nothing wrong, Kelechi. Nothing at all. She could hear him crying now, trying to muffle the sounds of his world collapsing. This brilliant boy, who had dreamed of becoming an engineer, who had worked so hard to make her proud, who had believed in the future she tried to build for him. "Sister, what will I do? Where will I go? The village school won't take me back. They say I'm too advanced now, and there's no teacher for higher mathematics, and without qualifications." "Listen to me," Chioma said, sitting up straighter despite the pain that shot through her chest. Something was hardening inside her, crystallizing into purpose. "This isn't the end of your story. I promise you that." "But how?" "Without Brother Emeka's support." "Forget Brother Emeka," Chioma said fiercely. "We don't need his support. We never did. We only need the truth." After she hung up, Chioma sat in the darkness of her prison, thinking. Chief Emeka had made one critical mistake. He thought her love for Kelechi was a weakness he could exploit. He was wrong. It was her strength, and it was about to become his downfall. That night, as Chief Emeka slept peacefully in their former bedroom, confident in his victory, Chioma began to write. Her hands shook from the chemotherapy he'd stolen from her. Her vision blurred from the fever that was already beginning to consume her. But she wrote with the determination of someone who finally understood what she was fighting for. Not just her own life, her brother's future, and every other woman who might fall into Chief Emeka Okafor's web. She was done being his victim. It was time to become his reckoning. The transformation was complete. The quiet, obedient wife who had let herself be erased was gone forever. In her place sat a dying woman with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. And she was about to remind Lagos why they should never underestimate the fury of a woman wronged. Chioma's video went viral in 6 hours. She'd recorded it on her phone at 3 a.m., sitting on the guest room floor with her back against the wall, wearing the simple Ankara dress she'd kept hidden from Chief Emeka's style consultants. No makeup covered the ravages of chemotherapy. No wig hid her bald scalp. She looked exactly like what she was, a dying woman with nothing left to lose. "My name is Chioma Okafor," she began, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "You might know my husband, Chief Emeka Okafor of Okafor Industries, candidate for Lagos State Governor. What you don't know is that 3 years ago, he calculated my death into his business plan." For 23 minutes, she told Lagos everything. The forged prenup, the medical investigation into her family history, the timeline of her planned disposal, the new wife he'd already impregnated while she fought cancer, the scholarship he'd revoked from her innocent brother. She showed the documents, played recorded phone conversations, named names, dates, amounts. Every detail of her destruction laid bare with surgical precision. "I'm not asking for your pity," she concluded, looking directly into the camera with eyes that burned with purpose. "I'm asking for your memory. Remember what happens to women who trust the wrong man. Remember what happens to families who get in the way of ambition. And remember that sometimes the only justice you get is the truth you tell before you die." She posted the video to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok simultaneously. Then she sent copies to every major newspaper, radio station, and blog in Nigeria. By dawn, #OkaforMonster was trending globally. Chief Emeka's phone started ringing at 5 a.m. First his campaign manager, then his business partners, then reporters from around the world who had picked up the story of Nigeria's political golden boy and his discarded cancer patient wife. Chioma listened to him screaming from his study, threatening lawsuits and demanding damage control. She heard him calling in favors, trying to bury the story, promising anything to anyone who would help him contain the wildfire she'd started. But the internet is forever, and truth spreads faster than lies. By noon, protesters had gathered outside Okafor Industries headquarters. By evening, 3 major construction contracts had been canceled. By the next morning, His political party had suspended his candidacy, pending investigation. The video had been viewed 12 million times and counting. But it was the response videos that truly destroyed him. Adana Nwosu posted first, confirming every word Chioma had said about Chief Emeka's lies. "He showed me fake funeral photos," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He let me believe I was comforting a widower when I was actually helping him commit adultery." Then came the former employees, sharing stories of contracts built on corruption, workers cheated of wages, and environmental disasters covered up with bribes. The political allies distanced themselves with carefully worded statements about concerning allegations. The business partners quietly severed ties. Most devastating of all was Dr. Adebola's response. The oncologist, outraged by Chief Emeka's termination of Chioma's treatment, gave a press conference detailing exactly what he'd done. Mrs. Okafor was responding well to chemotherapy, she announced to a room full of cameras. Her prognosis was good. We were hopeful for full remission. But her husband called my office and threatened to sue us if we continued treatment without his consent. He claimed she was mentally incompetent due to cancer medications. We were forced to comply, knowing it might kill her. The medical community erupted. The Nigerian Medical Association launched an investigation. International cancer organizations condemned Chief Emeka's actions. The story made CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera global headlines about the man who sentenced his own wife to death for defying him. But the moment that broke Chief Emeka completely came on day 3 of the media firestorm. Universities from around the world, Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, MIT, began offering full scholarships to Kelechi Okoye, the brilliant boy whose education had been destroyed by his sister's husband's revenge. They'd seen the video, read about this young man's academic excellence, and decided to turn his tragedy into triumph. "Brain drain is Nigeria's loss," said the Cambridge admissions officer who called Kelechi personally. "But sometimes it takes a tragedy to reveal exceptional talent. We'd be honored to have him." When Chioma told Kelechi the news, he wept. "Sister, how did this happen? I thought my life was over." "Sometimes the world still believes in justice," she said softly. "And sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you." That same afternoon, Chief Emeka appeared at her door for the first time since cutting off her treatment. He looked haggard, defeated, smaller somehow than the man who had once commanded rooms with his presence. "You've destroyed me," he said quietly, slumping into the chair across from her bed. "No," Chioma replied, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "You destroyed yourself. I just showed the world what you really are. My campaign is finished. My business is ruined. My reputation." "Your reputation was built on lies," she interrupted. "I just told the truth." Chief Emeka looked at her with something that might have been desperation. "We could fix this. Together. You could post another video. Say you were confused by the medications, that you exaggerated. No. I'll restore your treatment. Get you the best doctors in the world. Pay for Kelechi's education anywhere he wants to go." "No. Chioma, please." His voice cracked, and for a moment she saw the man she'd once thought she loved. "I can change. I can be better. We can start over." "You can't undo what you've done," she said simply. "You can't unforge those papers. You can't unknow my medical history. You can't unexploit my love for my brother. And you can't unspeak the words you said when you thought I was powerless to fight back." Chief Emeka stared at her for a long moment, and she watched the last of his false charm crumble away. "You realize this won't save you," he said coldly. "You're still dying. The cancer is still spreading. All you've done is drag me down with you." "Good," Chioma said, smiling for the first time in months. That's exactly what I intended. He stood up, straightening his tie with the automatic gesture of a man trying to reclaim dignity he'd never actually possessed. This isn't over, he warned. I still have resources. I still have connections. I'll rebuild everything you've destroyed. And when I do, I'll make sure you and your brother pay for what you've done to me. You're welcome to try, Chioma said peacefully. But you might want to check the news first. Chief Emeka frowned, pulling out his phone. His face went white as he read the breaking news alert. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission had just issued a warrant for his arrest. They'd been investigating Okafor Industries for months, but Chioma's video had provided the missing pieces of evidence they needed. They have recordings of your calls to my doctors, Chioma said softly. Threats against a medical facility tend to get law enforcement's attention. He looked at her with pure hatred now, all pretense gone. You poisonous bitch. You've destroyed everything. I've revealed everything, she corrected. There's a difference. As Chief Emeka fled their mansion for the last time, leaving behind sirens in the distance and a lifetime of carefully constructed lies and ruins, Chioma closed her eyes and smiled. She was dying. That part hadn't changed. But she was no longer dying as his victim. She was dying as the woman who'd brought down one of Nigeria's most powerful predators. And sometimes that was victory enough. 3 months later, John found Chioma under the Oshodi Bridge, and the story came full circle. She was barely conscious when he lifted her into his arms, her hospital gown torn and stained, the 4-tube from her final, desperate attempt at treatment still taped to her arm. The cancer had won, just as Chief Emeka had predicted it would. But everything else about his prediction had been wrong. Sister, the homeless man whispered as he carried her toward the road, searching for help. Stay with me. Chioma opened her eyes, the same eyes that had stared unflinchingly into a camera and brought down an empire built on lies. Even now, dying in the arms of a stranger, they held no defeat. Kelechi, she whispered. My name is John, he said gently, not knowing the cruel irony of sharing a name with her destroyer. But don't worry about names now. We need to get you to a hospital. Cambridge, she breathed and smiled. He's at Cambridge. The homeless man didn't understand, but he nodded anyway. That's good, sister. Hold on to that. What John didn't know was that he was carrying the woman whose final act of defiance had become legendary across Nigeria. The woman who had turned her death sentence into a weapon of justice. The woman who had proven that even the most powerful men could fall when confronted with simple, unvarnished truth. Chief Emeka Okafor was serving 12 years in Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison. The EFCC had found evidence of financial crimes going back 15 years, corruption, tax evasion, money laundering, and fraud totaling over 2 billion naira. His political career was finished. His business empire had been liquidated to pay restitution to the workers and communities he cheated. But more than his freedom had been lost. His name had become synonymous with the abuse of power, a cautionary tale told in business schools and political science classes across Africa. Don't be an Okafor had entered the Nigerian lexicon as shorthand for narcissistic cruelty. The prenup he'd forged had been declared fraudulent by 3 different courts. Chioma was legally entitled to half his assets, though she donated most of it to cancer research and women's shelters. She'd kept only enough to ensure Kelechi's education and her own medical care. Kelechi was thriving at Cambridge, studying engineering as he'd always dreamed. His professors called him brilliant. His classmates knew him as the boy whose sister had sacrificed everything to give him a future. He carried her photo in his wallet and her memory in everything he achieved. Dr. Adebola had started the Chioma Okafor Foundation for Cancer Patients' Rights, ensuring that no spouse could ever again interfere with life-saving medical treatment. Adana Nwosu had become a crusader for women's rights, using her medical training to help abuse victims. Even Mama Cass from the old Bukka had become something of a local celebrity, the woman who had witnessed the beginning of Nigeria's most famous love story turned nightmare. But Chioma herself had quietly disappeared from public view after the trials ended. She checked herself out of the private hospital where celebrities and politicians were hounding her for interviews, and vanished into Lagos's anonymous masses to die on her own terms. She'd ended up under the Oshodi Bridge not because she was homeless, but because she was tired. Tired of being a symbol, a cautionary tale, a martyr. She wanted to die as herself, not as the woman who destroyed Chief Emeka Okafor, but as Chioma Okoye, the girl who had once cooked with love and dreamed of a simple, honest life. "What's your name, sister?" John asked as he flagged down a Danfo bus, praying the driver would take pity on a dying woman. "Chioma," she whispered. "It means good gift." "Then you live up to your name," he said, climbing into the bus with her still in his arms. "Because finding you feels like a gift." She laughed weakly. "I'm dying, John. How is that a gift?" "Because you're not dead yet," he said firmly. "And as long as you're breathing, there's still time for miracles." The bus ride to Lagos University Teaching Hospital took 45 minutes. Chioma drifted in and out of consciousness, but each time she woke, John was there, holding her steady, talking to her about anything and everything. His own story of loss and survival, his dreams of rebuilding his life, his belief that every person deserved dignity regardless of their circumstances. "Why are you helping me?" she asked during one lucid moment. "Because someone helped me once," he replied simply. "A woman who ran a bukka in Surulere. She used to give me free meals when I was sleeping rough. Said everyone deserves kindness, especially when they have nothing to offer in return." Chioma stared at him, recognition dawning. "Mama Cass. You know her?" "I used to work for her," Chioma said, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Before everything changed." They looked at each other in wonder. Two broken souls connected by the same small act of kindness from years before. "Then this really is a gift," John said softly. "A chance to pass the kindness forward." At the hospital, Dr. Adebola was waiting. She'd been alerted by the homeless man's frantic phone call and had prepared a private room, away from the media circus that still surrounded anything related to Chioma Okafor. "She doesn't have much time," the doctor told John quietly, while Chioma slept. "Days, maybe a week. But she'll be comfortable. She'll have dignity." John nodded, settling into the chair beside her bed. He had nowhere else to be, no one else depending on him. For the first time in years, his purpose was clear. He would sit with her. He would make sure she wasn't alone. He would be the kindness she deserved after a lifetime of cruelty from the man who should have loved her most. When Chioma woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through the hospital window, and John was still there, reading a newspaper. "Cambridge student wins international engineering competition," he read aloud, showing her the headline with Kelechi's picture. "Says he's dedicating his victory to his sister, who taught him that knowledge is the only wealth no one can steal." Chioma smiled, the expression transforming her wasted features into something beautiful. "He's going to be okay." "More than okay," John agreed. "He's going to change the world." "And what about you?" she asked. "What will you do when I'm gone?" John considered the question seriously. "I think I'll apply to university. Mama Cass always said I was too smart to stay on the streets forever." Maybe she was right. Maybe she was, Chioma agreed. "And maybe that's why we found each other. So you could remember that you're worth saving too." She died 3 days later, peacefully, with John holding her hand and Kelechi's voice on the phone telling her about his latest academic triumph. Her funeral was attended by thousands, cancer patients she'd helped, women she'd inspired. students who saw her as a symbol of resistance against oppression. The president of Nigeria gave a eulogy, calling her the conscience of our nation. But the person who missed her most was the homeless man who had carried her to safety, who had learned from her final lesson about the power of simple human kindness. John used the small inheritance she'd left him to enroll in night school. He studied social work, inspired by her belief that everyone deserved dignity regardless of their circumstances. Years later, he would open a shelter for homeless youth, naming it the Chioma House in honor of the woman who had taught him that saving one person could change 2 lives. Chief Emeka Okafor died in prison 7 years later, forgotten by everyone except the guards who processed his death certificate. No one came to claim his body. But Chioma's story lived on, passed down through generations of young women who learned that love should lift you up, not tear you down. That your worth isn't determined by someone else's treatment of you. And that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth. In the end, she had chosen wisely after all. She had chosen courage over comfort, truth over safety, justice over peace. She had chosen to fight back. And in fighting back, she had won the only victory that truly mattered, the knowledge that her life, however brief, had made the world a little bit better.